So Johnny, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
This is a little thing we do. Our company's called Podcast Crew, and so we're a professional broadcasting studio, turnkey studio in Robbinsdale. And we're here as part of Twin Cities Startup Week and talking to different startups. So we have a podcast we call Spotlight, and it's really about putting the spotlight on you and giving you your 15 minutes of fame, if you will. So I'd love for you to start by introducing yourself to the audience and tell us who you are and kind of what you're up to.
Sure. So my name is Johnny Helmberger. I'm the founder and CEO of Madison, Helm, Inc. I'm a growth architect, or the firm is a growth architecture firm, and I'm the chief growth architect. So
What's growth architect exactly? Break that down for somebody like me.
yeah, right. So I mean, you've heard of architects,
Sure.
and so they might look at a lot or a building and based off of a desired outcome, figure out what resources are available to accomplish that. So they might see something that's not there, or see a version of what is there as something greater. And with what's available in a universe of infinite possibilities, bring about this new thing. And so that in that same sort of nature and way of thinking, I look at businesses. I do it with nonprofits and different types of organizations and ministries and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's doing that with a business. So, most people go in the business to be effective at doing something at the least, but probably growing it. And so I can bring that fresh perspective into what growth would look like, sort of to use a cliche term, out of the box. For me, I would say there is no box.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur who's been doing a couple businesses over the years, I know that sounds really interesting to me. I'm sure you've met a lot of people here. They're like, "Hey, man, I need to."
It sounds like you're
borrow your
most people.
time.
Yeah.
So how is it being part of the Twin Cities Startup Week? How's it been for you?
Sure. Well, it's always interesting. I don't go into it necessarily expecting a particular outcome. I know that I'm going to have some interesting conversations and see some people that I know from the Twin Cities startup community. I'm based from here in part. My company is actually in Miami Beach, but I have family here, and so I work from here quite a lot. But the work that I do is all over. It's not based here, but I have done a lot in the Twin Cities startup community. So lots of friends that I reconnect with, get updates to find out, what people are up to, and kind of find out what some of at least the regional trends are. Obviously, everybody's freaking out about AI. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting 10 people doing something in AI.
Our last guest was an AI.
Right.
So yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So give me maybe without name dropping, a case study. Tell me about a solution. Something you've been a part of that you're proud of.
Sure. Well, there's been a couple of different things that, so I've worked from Fortune 100 all the way down to, bootstrapping founders. A Fortune 100 company, I helped them launch a new line of business, which was a major, almost like a new brand for them.
Okay.
So they had always been a little bit more B2C, and they wanted to have more of a B2B business line. And so it was a really interesting experience. It might be an experience that won't repeat itself because it was a lot of organic growth. But to this day, it's the fastest business in history to hit $1 billion in revenue organically. And I say it might not repeat itself because I feel like a lot of the things that we see, the new things that we see, aren't really that new. They're a riff on something that's already been done.
Sure.
And so that kind of means that most people, if they really want to have accelerated growth, there's got to be some kind of like M&A strategy built in. You've got to acquire some business. It's not just selling value and sales acquisition. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So I try to take, when I do this growth architecture stuff, I try to take a holistic view to the point that I was just making about M&A. So even if I'm talking to a bootstrapping founder, they've got all these great ideas of, here's my game plan, the goal, the strategy that I have, but it's really interesting to see how it's usually influenced by the media and sort of the startup community, where there's usually kind of like, you're doing this to get an exit, or you want VC funding, or, there's like kind of only a few paths that people are really choosing for themselves, even though it could go a lot of different ways. And so, I think even if people really ultimately want an exit, if they think, how do I build this thing so that it grows exponentially and lasts forever, that they're probably more likely to get the exit that they want rather than focusing on the exit. And part of the reason why I say that is if I'm just getting started, but I'm already thinking, okay, as soon as I can, what would be the first company that I would acquire to help build the momentum in my growth? Or what would complement me? What's an adjacent business or a competitor? Because once you start generating revenue, you immediately become more interesting, not just to investors, but even to banks. And so it might not be out of the realm of possibility to acquire a business that already has momentum instead of you having to reinvent that. Build off of somebody else's momentum by, absorbing it, So if we start thinking, how do we grow our business, before we even launch, we're already thinking about stuff like that. I think we have like a healthier, holistic growth mindset, if that makes sense. So I've kind of digressed on answering your question, but so
It was a great digression.
right.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's sort of like taking some thought processes that you might really only find in a larger, mature company, but bringing that into even like, a super scrappy startup situation.
Right.
It gives you the ability to be more strategic and agile in everything that you're doing. And so I think that's maybe a way on how I bridge sort of like my thought process and methodology from Fortune 100 all the way down to, a super early stage startup. There's, I've got some other gold nuggets that I commonly give away, like, everybody wants help raising capital, or they want some investment or whatever. And I challenge people, especially if they're looking for funding just to get their MVP launched, which that's a pretty tough place to be in if you don't even really have something to show, and you're asking investors to put up money. If you can get people really committed to your idea, do a pre-sales strategy. So, I kind of figured this out really early on in my career. So just to kind of rewind a long way back, when I was 5 years old, my mom my mom had a really bad garage sale. It didn't go well. She didn't really sell much. and so I put a bunch of junk in my radio flyer wagon and started going door to door. And the only reason I remember this is because I got in trouble. Because Jimmy, the Greek kid down the street, I convinced him to break open his piggy bank and give me all the Greek denarii out of it. So his mom called my mom, and she was like, "Oh, you got to give the money back." I'm horrified, but you know what I mean. And so, but at first, instead of just being embarrassed, she was like, "Oh, but wait a minute, this is kind of cool, So she signed me up for the Olympic Sales Club. So here I am. I'm like this little kid, like in a sales program. You know what I mean? So by the time I get to, I graduate high school and I'm starting to do more career stuff, I've already had like, those early sales lessons, and so I found myself in more strategic sales role. I was kind of like predisposed to doing sales things, but
Sure.
But I was further along in sort of like my personal development in that way. So I just quickly found myself doing more strategic sales or sales leadership, or having maybe a bigger picture on things for somebody my age anyway. I would say when my practice really started to take form was early in my career. I was doing a lot of real estate development, commercial real estate. And so with my commercial real estate clients, I'm helping them with their business. It's supposed to be more real estate focused, but I'm kind of noticing how they're Forrest Gumping their way through their own business. And so, I'd give them
So they can value a building, but they have no idea what the operations or the rest of the stuff's supposed to be.
Yeah, or forget about real estate altogether. It's just I'm noticing how they're trying to do deals, and it's like, what are you doing? And so, I would just give them tips and stuff, and then it would turn into like, well, can you advise us a little bit more on this stuff? Like, thanks for help with our office space, but we've got a bigger, fish to fry. And so I found myself doing that a little bit more until, that was the kind of work that I was doing instead of real estate. And in the pivot happens during the big real estate bubble or crash. So in 2007 in particular is when I started doing more of this growth stuff and started to let the real estate stuff go a little bit more. But part of the reason I bring this up was when I was doing the real estate thing. And I know this is very meandering. There was this real estate development project. And it was, when condo conversions were really hot. So take a historical building and convert it to homes,
Right.
so we could live in. And so we had this great idea for this project. Again, idea stage. We didn't have anything to show, but what we did was we built out on the skyway level of this building. We built out a model. This is what it will look like. We decided to just throw a big party, invite the who's who in town to the party, and show everybody the model and kind of have some fun entertainment, turn it into sort of like an art activation, and just like have fun with it and see how many units we can pre-sell. Because in real estate, usually with a construction project, you have to pre-sell to a certain extent before the construction loan will fund.
Okay.
And so we thought, all right, well, let's see how this goes. So we throw this party, and that night we sold out the whole building.
Wow.
And so I was like, you know what? That was a major lesson for me. That I was like, I want to take this and use it everywhere I go.
Right.
So it doesn't have anything to do with real estate for me now. Now it's like, okay, you want to raise capital. You don't even have a product yet. Let's do a pre-sale strategy. So let's identify everybody we can pitch now. Let's say we've got a B2B product. So let's go to all I call them ultra-friendly companies that would like to support us even if they're not interested in our product. Let's go to them, pitch them, and if they're in, have them prepay for a year and promise to come back with the product in 6 months. They maybe get a deal compared to what like future customers will get. But if we do that for 90 days and get them to prepay, we might raise enough from that to finish the MVP, so we can in 6 months come back with an MVP for these guys. So even if we don't necessarily get enough for the MVP, we're post revenue now. We didn't have a product and we have revenue. We
Right.
got signed we don't just have signed contracts. We have funds from the customers
In the bank.
Yeah. So our story is already way better to tell a potential
sure.
investor. You know
For
what I mean?
sure.
So
That's been kind of like a common strategy for you as you're helping to just kind of look at that. Like the pre-funding, raise capital, get it out there.
Right.
Proof of concept, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And so, I would say there's a lot of consulting firms out there, right? A lot of people say, we do GDM, go to market, and or whatever different slice of sales and marketing they might call it. You know what I mean? And especially in Silicon Valley, I feel like there's your stereotypical, marketing funnel, fractional CMO hack, and everybody's running in the same play. And so for me, I don't have like a bunch of play cards that I play. I've got this approach where, like an architect, it's like I take that architect approach to looking at the situation and we figure out, all right, what's the strategy? But then even with the big firms, whether we're talking about Deloitte or whoever, you got Fortune 100 companies that'll bring them in, drop several $1 million on a new strategy, and when it's done, they leave, and everybody's back to their old habits. And so a big part of this is let's say we have this pre-sale strategy. I don't just say, hey, this is a great idea, so now go do it, because they're not going to go and do it. They might kind of do it, but they're not really.
Right. They're not going to put their full weight behind it.
Right. So then there's sort of like, okay, let's break this down beyond the strategy into the tactics. Here's what you need to do every day. And based off of what resources are available in the business, if it's like a one-person shop sort of a thing, then maybe it's like on Monday you do this and on Tuesday you do that, and we figure out how to really create a practical weekly business life for the individual solopreneur or whatever, or if they've got more resources, more people, great, even better. But if it's in the cards for me to help kind of co-execute, if you will, then I'll do that too. I mean, usually for me to do that, it's a bigger team, or maybe it's a more mature business. But if it's something that I really love and I want to be involved in, of course, I'm gonna maybe do a little bit more.
It sounds like maybe you're at the place now where you can kind of pick and choose the right projects for you to be a part of. Is that?
Yeah, well, is it? Yes and no. I mean, there's a big part of what I've done. There's a spiritual element to it as well, where, all along there've been a lot of situations where I've had insights in projects or businesses or however you want to phrase it, where it's sort of like inexplicable how we get these insights, and so I like I would say, advise in a certain way where it's like I can't even believe what I'm saying myself, and the people are like, wow, I don't know why I didn't think of that. I'm like, I don't know why I thought of that. You know what I mean? And so sort of like an inexplicable thing, and I found that I would take credit for things like even the Fortune 100 company project that I talked about. Like I can't take credit for a lot of this stuff, because I can't put my finger on it. And there's a lot of people out, maybe most people will say, I did this and here's how I did it. And I'm even going to sell you the playbook on how I did it. But the reality is, even for those people, it's like so much of that, they couldn't have done that without God. And so I felt a lot, I've always felt this nudge that, I didn't really do that. This was like, there's so much that happened in this situation, in these circumstances, that I can't say that I did this, but I can't say anybody else did it. So it's like clearly this thing where it's bigger than me. And so it ended up ultimately becoming sort of a faith journey for me, where a year ago I ended up, I had been getting nudged to partner with God, so to say. And so I was kind of trying to do that more, but really the way I was doing it is I get another great opportunity and I'd be like, oh, hallelujah, thank you. But you know what, God, I know exactly what I'm doing here, so I'll take it from here, sort of thing. And then I'm off to the races doing it my way,
Sure.
And then it started to be a crescendo of those experiences that I had where I'd have like these inexplicable insights or like just sort of like magical things would happen. They kind of were like dwindling, it seemed, but at the same time, I was increasingly taking credit for it, And so ultimately, it became more than a nudge, and I just had a straight up calling to stop and wait. So I just went straight monk for most of last year, actually. And so stopped working, turned off all the channels, so like people couldn't even get a hold of me. And the craziest, it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, because from talking to me, you could probably tell that I like to work, I like to grind. I'm a father, I've got to provide, and so it was a really uncomfortable situation for me to trust that the provision would still be there, that all those things that were happening, that I wasn't really doing it. And so it was kind of an experiment in a way for me to see that, in fact, yeah, like all of the things were still falling into place, even though I was, just kind of making sure that I was seeking God,
Right.
And so
That is very brave.
right. But it is. But I've got to tell you, man, when we're challenged to be brave like that, it's actually incredibly scary.
Right.
It's not like you're walking in with your chest puffed out. I mean, it's like a humbling experience, and then to see everything still coming together, it is like my faith is on a whole new level than it was before, for sure. But so as you can imagine, obviously, I'm not a monk right now, and so I came out of it, but the lessons that I got from that are endless. I had to start writing them down after a week, because I knew people would ask in conversation, and then I've got to have some way to recount these things, But anyway, so the big thing for me now is that I'm being more intentional about partnering. So we go into a meeting, the generally accepted approach to a well-run meeting is that we've got, agreed upon agenda, and like, here are the 5 things we're going to cover or whatever. But, like even in that situation, it's like I go in, we all agree, here's the agenda. But like now I've got sort of like an eye for like, all right, well, what's God's agenda with this? And maybe we don't get you through all those 5 things, or maybe we don't close the deal. But if I walked away knowing that I got like whatever there was supposed to be happening that wasn't on that agenda, if I like noticed like, okay, I think something happened there, then I know that meeting went exactly the way it was supposed to. Even if, like we didn't get through their written agenda. You know what I mean?
Very fascinating.
Yeah. So it definitely, I've been some friends that have kind of watched me through this journey. They call me Morpheus now, to use like, so I'm not Neo. I'm not claiming to be Neo, but it's kind of like, so now I'm back, in the business world. But I'm doing this thing where I'm kind of like not really seeing it the way I was seeing it before. I see the hologram now, and I'm trying to help other people see the hologram, in that, our purpose isn't that idea that we think we have for our next startup, because so much of our ideas and our strategies and all of that, like whether it's what we're going to do or how what our exit's going to be or whatever, we're all conditioned. We're in the startup community. We all hear the same, talking heads, the same influencers, and that stuff really affects how we make our plans. And it's like, well, what if there's a better source for our insights? And so I'm now sort of like a voice for that, for people to start to pay attention that, maybe the best insight you're going to get for what you're trying to do isn't from anybody in the Twin City Startup Week, or maybe it's, nobody in Silicon Valley, or there's not a single VC that's going to tell you what you need to hear, that, there's not a single person that will tell you. And so, like if we're not like in tune, we're not trying to walk with God in that way, even in our business practice, it's like, you might find your way, but it might not be what it could have been,
Amazing. It does. Yeah, amazing. I like to wrap these up by asking for a piece of inspiration. And honestly, this whole thing has been quite inspiring. But yeah, if you could just kind of give me or give the audience something that inspires you, maybe outside of what you've already shared, or something you feel like could inspire the audience to kind of take that next step in life.
Yeah. So, what's been an interesting topic that keeps coming up, and it's a little bit related to what we've already talked about, but, I keep getting asked, what is your favorite book, or what's like the number one book right now, or what was your favorite book last year, or whatever.
Sure.
And like I was the same guy asking the same question, always like trying to read as much as I could. And since I did the monk thing, I'm like reading nothing except for the Bible. And I would say that probably some of the best insights that I've got were, the ones in the red print, if you know what I mean. And, the red font were like the literal words of Jesus. And if you were to just like put your imagination out when you're reading them, and imagine like that he's sort of like the startup guru or whatever, put whatever face on him you want to put on him. So like you can sort of like hear him a little bit differently,
Right.
So that's what I've been doing. And I've found the most inspiration from like literally of all of the business books I've ever read, of everybody I've ever listened to, doing that little experiment, that's been like the most influential for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, that was amazing, Johnny. Thank you for taking the time.
Well,
today.
It was amazing for me too. Just sitting here with you. Yeah.
This is pretty cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
That wraps us up for
All right.
today.